Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. But every once in a while, we don't lead with a person, but with a thing. And tonight is one of those nights when we're going to lead with the Oxford English Dictionary, which is by most measures the world's most definitive work on the most global language. Since the first compilation of words in the Oxford English Dictionary came out in 1884, I guess we could say it died at the age of 130, but it's not really dead. Here, according to the Telegraph of London, is the story. Publishers fear the next edition of the Oxford English Dictionary will never appear in print form because its vast size means only an online version will be feasible and affordable for scholars. It's all academic for now anyway, they say, because the third edition of the famous dictionary, estimated to fill 40 volumes, is running at least 20 years behind schedule. Michael Prophet, the Oxford English Dictionary's first new chief editor for 20 years, said the mammoth masterpiece is facing delays because the information overload from the internet is slowing his compilers. His team of 70 philologists, including lexicographers, etymologists, and pronunciation experts, has been working on the latest version, known as the OED3, for the past 20 years. Michael Prophet revealed the next edition will not be completed until 2034 and likely only to be offered in an online form because of its gargantuan size. He said a lot of the principles of the OED stand firm, but how it manifests has to change, and how it reaches people has to change. Work on the new version, currently numbering 800,000 words, has been going on since 1994. The first edition, mooted in 1858 with completion expected in 10 years, took 70 years. He said his team working on the definition of new entries has a target of 50 to 60 words per month, slower than in the past because the World Wide Web has created so much more source material. Mr. Prophet said, I averaged about 80 when I started because in 1989 we didn't have computers on our desks, so there was a limit as to how much you could research. The library was our primary source. If the new dictionary is printed, and publishers Oxford University Press says a printed version will only appear if there's sufficient demand at the time, it will comprise 40 volumes, double the length of the second edition in 1989. Almost one-third of a million entries were contained in the 21,730 pages of the second version of the OED, which sells for £750 and had been online since 2000, where it receives more than 2 million hits per month. Here's a bit of history on the world's most prestigious source for words, the Oxford English Dictionary.
While in Oxford, I've come to find out about a book which we all take for granted, yet which, in its original form, took 70 years to complete and ran to 10 volumes. Today, we know it as the Oxford English Dictionary. The Oxford English Dictionary was a great feat of Victorian ingenuity and determination, as great as any engineering achievement of that age, and it still remains the ultimate authority on the English language. When it was first published in 1928 by the Oxford University Press, it listed over 400,000 words and included not only their meaning, but their historical root too. To hear the story of this monumental undertaking, I've come to meet the Oxford University Press's head of archive, Martin Moore. So how did the idea of the dictionary come about then, Martin?
Well, the dictionary was the idea of a group of academics in London in the 1850s, and they were called the Philological Society. To mark Queen Victoria's reign, they decided to make a dictionary that was bigger and better than any made before, such as the great dictionary by Samuel Johnson in the 18th century.
The problem with Samuel Johnson's dictionary was that it only listed 43,000 words, and it was tainted by definitions that reflected his own prejudice. Most famously, he defined oats as a grain given to horses in England, but which in Scotland supports the people. It is perhaps ironic then that the great genius of the Oxford English Dictionary was a Scot, James Murray, who took over as editor in 1879. So how did the project change under the leadership of James Murray?
Well, James Murray was a remarkable man. He was a school teacher from Scotland. Yeah. He never had the money to go to university and get a formal degree, but it's quite clear he had a mind that would put most Oxford professors to shame. Among many other accomplishments, James Murray taught himself about 40 different languages.
Really?
He could speak, read and write them all. And he sees that the dictionary requires far more organisation and resources than the society had first thought. And it's Murray who puts out an appeal to readers in the English language to come forward and to read texts for the dictionary. We begin to talk about hundreds and hundreds of readers sending in information to Murray and his colleagues.
The readers worked as word detectives, scouring every possible type of printed text, from medieval literature to scientific journals, from song sheets to recipe books, even wills, collecting words and their meanings. They then sent quotations to Murray and his team on half sheets of notepaper, and within a short while, over 1,000 quotation slips a day were arriving in an outbuilding in Murray's back garden. And you had to obviously check every single form that came back there.
Indeed. They have to take every piece of paper, they have to go round libraries in Oxford or beyond, double-checking, and then check that everything written out by hand matches the printed version down to the very last full stop. So you can see here at the top left of this slip, there is the word emperorship has been written out. This is what dictionary makers call the head word. You'll see a sentence written out showing how the head word emperorship has been used in a certain text, and then you can see a piece of information telling you where that sentence occurs.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? It really is.
Astonishing.
So all the people that actually wrote in with these little forms were obviously academics themselves, because I guess at that time half the population of the country couldn't read or write anyway.
Literacy wasn't as widespread as it is now, certainly, but not everybody who contributed these slips of paper to the dictionary was a professional academic. And one of the largest contributors to the first edition was a man called William Minor. Minor was an American surgeon. He served during the US Civil War and became very disturbed as a result of the experiences he went through there. He came to England to try and recover, but in fact he got worse and murdered somebody. And as a result of that, he was incarcerated for life in Broadmoor Hospital. And of course, Dr. Minor had nothing else to do with his life but to read. And indeed he did this. He's one of the great invisible architects of the dictionary, as it were, one of the main people behind the scenes, contributing information to this amazing text.
Minor wasn't the only unusual contributor to the dictionary. Murray had 11 children, and they earned pocket money sorting the 3.5 million quotation slips that Murray and his team had to deal with. Even so, it was obvious that the enormous task of cataloguing every word used in the English language would take longer than anyone had thought. How long did it take him?
Well, it even surprised Murray for all his genius. The first little part of the dictionary took 5 years to appear in print, and that went from the letter A to the word ant. So
You're joking.
This is just a tiny part of the language.
Wow.
Other bits of the language prove to be easier. The dictionary picks up speed as it goes along. But even so, sadly, James Murray did not live to see the end of the first edition of the dictionary. James Murray died in 1915, and by that time the dictionary had got to the letter T. So he could see the winning post, he just did not live long enough to get to it. And it was left to other editors to carry on the work. And so the first edition of this amazing piece of scholarship is finished in 1928. It does not take 10 years, it takes over 40 years to assemble this single text.
Today, the complete Oxford English Dictionary contains over 500,000 entries, and 100 new words are submitted for inclusion every month. So it looks like the job Murray dedicated his life to will never truly be done.
Mr. Prophet said the internet represented a lifeline for giant reference works like the Oxford English Dictionary. Strong works of reference have great future on the internet. The idea is to link from the context in which people are working directly into the OED, providing information at the point at which it's needed. Other planned innovations include linking the OED to a historical thesaurus developed over the past 30 years by a team in Glasgow, he said. People mostly want to know about topics, not just words, but internet search engines are literal-minded, and this allows you to expand your search into areas you didn't know about. The first OED came out in sections from 1884, completed in 1928. Despite its worldwide reputation, the OED has never made a profit, as its commitment to continuing research runs up costs of several million pounds a year. I'm going to turn now to Rubin Hurricane Carter, who died recently at the age of 76. Well-known boxer who was convicted twice of a triple murder. His story was made into a movie with Denzel Washington. Denzel Washington won an Academy Award nomination for it, and a famous song by Bob Dylan. Neither the movie nor the song really tells the story that accurately. try and give you the facts as they are and the interpretation as I see it. Rubin Carter grew up in Paterson, New Jersey. He grew up a rough childhood, went off to the Army, learned to box, came home and was a middleweight. He was a tough kid, been in a lot of trouble. He had a great left hook. He was, by most counts, a pretty good boxer, not a great boxer. His greatest victory was over Emile Griffith in late 1963. Emile Griffith was a welterweight who was moving up to the middleweight division, and Carter knocked him out in one round, actually 2 knockdowns in one round. I think Emile Griffith may still have felt the effects of his fight where he killed Benny Kid Perrette in a fight the year before. We talked about that when we did our Emile Griffith podcast. Anyway, Carter got a chance for the middleweight title against Joey Giardello in 1964, and he lost a 15-round decision. This is where you get the first of the inaccuracies in the Rubin Carter story. Unlike what was portrayed in the movie, the decision was unanimous. It wasn't controversial. Giardello clearly beat Carter, although it was a fairly close fight. And actually, Joey Giardello had to sue the movie makers because of the inaccuracies, and he won $350,000 because they portrayed it as a racial victory. The announcer never said what they said he said, stuff like that. And that was pretty much the beginning of the end of Rubin Carter's boxing career. After that, he lost most of his major fights, so unlike the Dylan song, he wasn't going to be the champion of the world. He was essentially a good puncher who could get flummoxed by a good fighter. Then came the seminal event of his life. In 1966, there was a triple murder at the Lafayette Bar and Grill in Paterson, New Jersey at 2:30 in the morning. Hurricane Carter and a casual acquaintance, John Artis, were picked up by the police after the murder. They were originally let go, but 3 months later they were charged with the triple murder. As both the movie and the song depict, they were convicted in 1967. They were retried in 1976 and convicted again. Ultimately, their case went to the federal court in 1985, and the conviction was overturned on constitutional issues. The state decided not to retry them again, and they were released after 18 years in prison. Hurricane Carter's name became synonymous with unjust conviction. He was a cause célèbre among celebrities and people like Nelson Mandela and Muhammad Ali. He moved to Canada, where he turned his life around. He became a well-read, articulate guy, an advocate for those convicted unjustly. He wrote, he gave speeches, primarily to liberal audiences. He got awards, doctorates of law, and primarily because of Dylan's song in the movie, he will always be known as a figure who stands for the iniquities of the criminal justice system in America. As the liberal sports writer Jack Neufeld said, if Bob Dylan writes an 8-minute song about your case, it's better than a brief to the Supreme Court. What can we say about the Rubin Carter case? Well, a lot of people say he was wrongfully convicted for something he didn't do, and that's not technically accurate. He was unjustly convicted. There was no question. There was prosecutorial misconduct. There was investigative misconduct. There was racism. There was clearly a constitutional issue that was legitimate, and all these things meant that he did not get fair trials. But whether or not he was actually involved in the triple murders in some way is another question. I don't think we know the answer to that. I'm not sure we're ever going to know the answer to that, and it is a legitimate question. There was significant circumstantial evidence linking him and Artis to the murders, but if the case were tried fairly, there may have been substantial reasonable doubt, and that's what this case should be about, a fair trial which Rubin Carter did not get. I'm not sure that the movie nor the song ever really give you the issue as they should have been framed. One of the best accounts of this, by the way, is by one of my favorite writers, Nelson Algren. I met him before he moved out to Paterson, New Jersey to investigate the murders. He found that there was substantial reasonable doubt also. It's a wonderfully written account, and Nelson Algren ironically left Chicago and moved to New Jersey for the rest of his life. Neither the movie nor the song is especially accurate on most of the details. They both have an agenda. I'm not sure that the agenda serves the overall story as well as it should, but hey, it's a pretty good movie, and it's a very good song. And people in America deserve fair trials. I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer, Sid Tepps, and what else can we close with tonight? But Bob Dylan's classic 1975 song was played at fundraisers, including one at Madison Square Garden. It became part of his Rolling Thunder Review. Dylan developed it from the book Carter wrote in prison called The 16th Round, and it's punctuated by Scarlett Rivera's ominous violin. My daughter thinks it's Dylan's best song, and I couldn't argue with her. It's The Hurricane.
All the criminals in their coats and ties are free to drink martinis and watch the sunrise while Rubin sits like Buddha in a 10-foot cell, an innocent man in a living hell. That's the story of the hurricane, but it won't be over over till they clear his name and give him back the time he's done. But in a prison cell, the last time he could have been the champion of the world.